Folks, welcome back once again to Indaba Africa. This is Chris. Happy to have you guys.
Welcome back once again.
And happy to have everybody here. Thanks for tuning in once again on this special feature, my usual Saturday special feature live stream. I have a guest coming on in just a moment, David Otto. Going to introduce him. What I normally do on Saturdays is we were doing this at 11 every Saturday and was going to move to 12 Eastern Standard Time. But David was not available earlier, so we're doing it today a little bit later. So it's 2 p.m. here in the East Coast of the United States, 8 p.m. in Gaborone and in Johannesburg, 7 p.m. in Abuja and London, where he's coming into us from. David is in the United Kingdom. He is the Director of Counterterrorism at SISO. He's going to tell us about that in just a moment. So I hope you find this conversation interesting. If you've got questions, please feel free to ask your questions in the chat. We'll do our best to get to them. I'm keeping track of questions as the conversation goes on, as I normally do with my special features. Dave and I have worked together in the past. He's very well informed, knows what he's talking about. Should be quite interesting. I hope that you all find this a good discussion. And so with that, I'm going to invite him into the room here. Just give me a moment here. Let me do that. Participants, let me get him in here. All right. And once he comes in, whoops, I got to fix that now. All right. And once he comes in, whoops, I got to fix that now. David, can you turn down the volume on your side because I can hear, I don't know if you have earpiece in, hopefully, because I can get feedback on myself. There we go. Whoa, what's going on with my computer? Sorry, my computer's acting up here. I can't get to my Zoom window for some reason. It's not coming up. Sorry about that. Just a moment. Where's Zoom at? It's not coming up. Sorry about that. David, are you there?
Yes, I'm here, Chris.
Okay, well, for some reason, Zoom is not working properly. Hang on, folks. Well, for some reason, Zoom is not working properly. Hang on, folks. It's not there. I don't know what's going on here. It just went all haywire. Hang on a second. What's going on here? It just went all haywire. This is weird. Hang on there, David. This is strange. Let me try to reopen this. Let's see what happens. Return to meeting. Here we go. All right, let's see if that works now. All right, there we go. My goodness. Sorry about that, folks. I got booted out of the meeting. That's not supposed to happen. I'm still hearing myself on feedback because you don't have earpiece in, do you, David?
I'm still do you want me to put my PC off?
You don't have earpiece. Yeah, if you could just turn it, if you're able to do that, that would be great because we're getting feedback. I can hear everything I say in repetition. Or just put on mute. That way you can watch it. I can hear everything I say in repetition. But are you able to hear me if you go on mute? It's a question.
Yeah, let me just see. I can hear you, Chris. Let me shut my PC off. Yeah, let me just see. I can hear you, Chris. Let me shut my PC off. Yeah, let me just see. I can hear you, Chris. Let me shut my PC off.
Hang on, folks. Be patient, please. Hang on, folks. Be patient, please.
Is that any better?
Yeah, that's. I can hear you now, but I was still hearing an echo. I heard myself about 5 seconds after. I'm still hearing myself after the fact. About 5 seconds after. I'm still hearing myself. About 5 seconds. I'm still hearing myself. All right, that's not going to work very well. Do you have the volume on there? Right, that's not going to work very well.
I'm just going to.
Do you have the volume on there?
I've got the volume, Chris. I'm just.
The problem is if you have the volume on, there's a delay between the live stream processing and the transmission, so you get an echo of everything we say. That's why you have to put it on mute, put the earpiece in.
All right, what do you want me to do? You want me to turn my volume completely down?
Yeah, please do that. And are you still able to hear me though? Is the question. Do you have an earpiece you can put in? Listen. Are you still able to hear me though?
I can hear you. I can hear you, Chris.
No, I'm saying if you turn the volume all the way down, I can still hear feedback.
I can hear you. I can hear you.
Okay. Now I don't hear myself. I don't know if you can hear me is the question now. If you have an earpiece in, then you'll be able to hear me. I don't hear myself. I don't know if you can hear me.
Okay, let me find an earpiece.
Okay, all right. Please do that. Get an earpiece and then come back and I'll get you in here. But put it on mute in the meantime because otherwise I just get feedback. It's really bad for everybody.
Okay.
And I'll get you in here, but put it on
Give me a second.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Give me a second.
All right, folks. I can still hear the background. I've got that on mute. That's really weird. Strange. I think it's because Zoom is giving the feedback because he still has the mic. The guest is from the United Kingdom, Renier Duplessis. He's based in London. We've worked together. Oh, God, this is really frustrating. I need him to fix that. I'm gonna put mine on mute for a second. All right. Let me just boot him out of the room, and then let me see. Okay, when he's ready. All right. Okay. Now, can everybody hear me okay? That's the question now. If you can hear me okay, then we're good. All right, folks, hear me? Okay. You hear it, we don't. Well, no, I'm definitely hearing it. I mean, it was echo. I can't have a conversation like that because I was hearing my voice 3 times because he had that on. All right, so you guys can hear me fine now. Yeah, this is Zoom without my other party in there, so I need him to put earpiece in. He's got the mic. So anytime anybody calls in, folks, if you're ever going to call on the show, you need to have your volume off, just like calling a radio station, because the microphone picks up the video you're playing in the background plus your voice, and the problem is it's not in sync because YouTube streams are either 30 seconds, 15 seconds, or 3 seconds behind. And so you get this problem. Rainier's got 8 out of 10, so 5 by 5. Let me see if he's coming back here. I'm sorry for that. Is he waiting? Let me send him a message. Tell me when you're ready. Yeah. So yeah, my guest is David Otto. He's the director of counterterrorism at SISO. We'll get him back here in a second as soon as he gets an earpiece in. My apologies for the confusion on that, folks. So he is an expert, specialist, subject matter expert on counterterrorism and insurgency, and his origins are Nigerian, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. We'll find out. Ask him that question if you like. But we've worked together in some issues when it's come to insurgency and counterterrorism in the past. So hopefully we'll get him back here in just a second into the conversation. Kyle says sounds very interesting. Yes, Rainier, I'll have him explain SISO. That was the intent. I'm not going to steal his thunder. So my apologies that I didn't tell you what SISO is. I don't like to give acronyms and not tell people what they are, but I don't want to steal his thunder. Apparently they're still underground, but not all of them. Who's that? Feedback loop. There shouldn't be feedback now. You guys should be able to hear fine. So let me see if I can get him back in here if he's ready. Let me see if he's in. Hopefully we won't get the feedback now. I've got that on mute. Okay, there he is. Are you there? All right, now I can hear a little better. Let me go ahead and turn up in the stream because it's multiple things of software here. I can still hear myself. What's going on here? Are you getting that on your end? That's really weird. Okay. Yeah, but it's hard for me to have the conversation and then hear myself repeat it afterwards, but we'll go with that. Yeah, but it's hard for me to have. Okay, now I don't hear myself. Okay, good. All right, so David Otto, my guest today on Chris Wide Africa, a specialist subject matter expert in counterinsurgency and national security. So David, folks have already started asking questions about what is SISO. Can you tell us a little bit about that, and then we'll talk about yourself and your background. About what is SISO? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yes, Chris, thank you very much. And as you said, my name is David Otto. I am the director for counterterrorism and organized crime for Global Risks International. Just as recently, I've moved into an organized. Chris, it seems as if the line is really bad. But
all right, let me do this. Why don't we just do this? I'll open a new Zoom session. Okay. I'll send you the link in just a moment. Wait for it on WhatsApp, and I'll send you a link. Okay, folks, hang in there. We got to stop this. So I'm gonna exit Zoom and come back into it, and we'll go from there. All right. So please be patient in the stream. David, go ahead and hang up. I'll leave the meeting. I'll close the meeting. If folks stay on the stream, be very patient for me. I appreciate that. Okay, I'll be right back, folks. Hang in there. All right. This is crazy. What's going on here? End meeting for all. Okay, there we go. New meeting. Copy link. Okay, let me get stop Zoom. Okay, I'm back. I don't know if you guys can smoke break. Smoke break. I see that. That's good. Okay, so let me do a quick test, folks. I'm back now. I'm a little low on the screen, but can you hear me fine? The deep state says Jacques. No, it's Huawei. Huawei. That's who's responsible. I lost 3 viewers because we did that. All right, can you guys hear and see me now? That's the question. All right. All right. No smoke breaks. Just come back and see. Are you here? Can you guys hear me? Come on, give me. Yes. Okay, you got it. Okay, I'm going to invite David back in. So clearly the problem is not here. Hopefully it's not a problem on his end. So I'm going to give him a link real quick. Give me a second here. Paste. There we go. All right. There's the second link. David should get that. We'll get him back up here in a second, hopefully, and then we'll get going again. Sorry about that, folks. Thank you. It's clear. Appreciate that. Bye-bye, Donkey. All the folks in South Africa, Kia Laboa in Botswana, and merci mille fois, l'Afrique de l'Ouest. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for that. Okay, so let's see if we can't get on my screen over here. We're gone. Well, look at that. Someone subscribed to the channel, even though we've got all these technical difficulties. Dawn Hollander. Thank you for coming on there, Dawn. Appreciate it. Let me see if David's up now. Nope, he's not back yet. Give him a second. He has not read the link yet. Okay, I'll have to send it to him multiple locations. Come on, man. Maybe he's having trouble with his computer. Anyway, sorry about this, folks. Yeah, technical difficulties. Don't you love it? It happens sometimes. Anyway, Martin is in Hong Kong. Totally legal here. Well, cool beans. I'm glad to hear it. Your sound and his was fine, just the background echo. Yeah, Tian, I know, and I was trying to explain to him he's got to turn off the microphone. You have to turn the microphone off on that end, but it was still playing. There's no stream on my end that's playing with any sound, so that wasn't coming from my end. And right now, I actually have the stream playing, but the sound is on mute, so you're not hearing it, and there's no echo. So it wasn't on this end, so it has to be on that end or the connection through the Zoom servers, one of the two. So let me see if he's up there now. He's not back yet. Okay. Oh, 1 second. Okay, he's adjusting something. So, yeah, so folks, thanks for tuning in. It's been an exciting couple of days here at Chris Wide Africa. Wow, an explosion of viewership, 1,741 hours of content watched yesterday. Thank you so much. Yeah, Jeff, I think the issue's on his end. So thank you so much for that very much. 400 plus subscribers joined yesterday. Lots of people watching the content. Hey, Erica, good to see you there. Counterinsurgency, that's one crazy word. Yeah, it is. And maybe we've got something going on. For those who are curious, I am wearing a rugby jersey today, and my rugby jersey today is, anyone want to guess? You should be able to recognize this jersey. Let me stand up there. There we go. Yep, that's right. It's the Brave Blossoms from Japan, ladies and gentlemen. There we go. Okay, here he is. Let's get him in. Hopefully, fingers crossed. Fingers crossed this will work, and it sounds right. Okay, I see him there, but let me just double check and make sure I've got the volume on. Okay, I can see him. His microphone is coming on now. And David, are you there?
I'm here, Chris.
Oh, that's crystal clear. Crystal clear. I don't know if you were able to fix a problem on your end or if it was a Zoom, whatever it is, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, now we get started. We apologize for wasting your time, but that's technology. I would say that it was free, except that I'm actually paying Zoom for this service, so I expect better. Yeah. So before I let you explain who you are very quickly there, David, let me do this for folks so they know what's going on here. So we're on the regular Saturday guest appearance where I have a live stream every Saturday, and we invite a guest on. This case is David Otto, who's a specialist in counterinsurgency and counterterrorism and national security studies. He's going to tell us a little bit about his role as director of SISO. People have already asked me what the acronym is. I didn't want to steal your thunder, so I'm going to give you a chance to answer that. But very quickly, just so people know, if you have been a member of Chris Wide Africa for over 30 days, after 1 month, you get a new icon next to your name. And you may have noticed that you've got a moai. And yes, that is the carved stone figureheads of the figures from Easter Island, the moai. And so that's what your little icon is if you're seeing it. So yesterday you might have had a little house with a tree. You were under 30 days. Now you have a moai. That's what it is. So Chris White memberships are open if you guys want to join. It doesn't cost much, just part of being a community. It's up to you guys. Okay, so David Otto is my guest. Here we are on Saturday talking about issues in Africa, about security and insurgency. David, tell us a little bit about yourself and your background. You live in the UK. You're from the UK, but you have ancestry that comes from a different part of the world. If you can share that so people understand and have appreciation of who you are.
Oh, thank you, Chris. And thanks for the patience that the viewers have been able to endure. Technology is such an unpredictable element sometimes, you know. So, thankfully we are up. Yeah, but thank you, Chris. I'm David Otto, as you said, an African, but originally I come from Cameroon. A lot of people think I'm Nigerian, but I don't correct them because Cameroon, Nigeria is the same. We share the same boundaries. We share the same culture. It's just a geographical, colonial kind of legacy. So I don't have any problems being referred to as a Nigerian. Yes, my background, Chris, as you know, is in counterterrorism and counterinsurgency. I look at various ways that governments can deal with these issues that we're facing today. I'm the current director for the SISO. So SISO, it stands for Step In, which is the SI, and then Step Out, which is the SO. And it simply means
that's pretty clever there. I have a small scale commercial farmer who comes on, and his farm business is called BEIT, and I thought that was like an Anglo-Saxon name like bite, or he goes, no, it just stands for be it. Be it. It's a step in, step out. I love it.
Yeah, so step in, step out, and the whole idea of step in, step out, was very simple, Chris. It looks at the reasons why people get involved in insurgency, why people get involved in terrorism, why people get involved in crime, and from that background, we then devise a step out, some kind of an exit strategy for them, and we believe in our organization that in order for you to design your step out strategy, you must be able to have a very good understanding of the step in, methodologies of each individual. So that is basically what we do. And my work involves designing programs and advising governments on step out strategies. And basically that's it. But I do a lot of programs for organizations, including the UN, NATO, the DOD, for looking at African insurgency, how to deal with these groups, how to handle them, but more importantly, building the capacity for African countries to be able to handle these issues themselves. And I'm sure, Chris, that's why you've been very instrumental in one of the programs that we hosted, where we talked about how African countries can be able to deal with the foreign fighters. After the collapse of the Islamic State. And Africa is currently experiencing some of those issues today because of the collapse of the caliphate and a lot of foreign fighters that have gone to Africa. So, yes, I'm glad to be here, Chris, and to answer questions from your audience, but also to give my views as somebody who has, some level of local knowledge on what is going on, the various areas of concern in Africa today. We would dive into that, Chris.
Absolutely. No, it's great. I think we'll maybe dispel one of the things, the myths that's out there. One of the things we frequently hear is the easy excuse, the coffee table excuse, why people become involved in terrorism or insurgencies is because of poverty. But I mean, if that were the case, 80% of the world or half the world would be in insurgencies right now. It's a little more complicated than that, but that's always the excuse given. It definitely plays a role in some places, but often it's more of a governance neglect. But we'll get to that in a second. So I just want to throw that out there. But folks are asking. Someone said beautiful jungles in Cameroon. I guess they've been to Cameroon. So anyway, now let me ask you this real quick, David. So do your folks come originally from the Bokassa, or are they just Cameroon proper, or what? Do you have the Anglo background, the Francophone background?
Yes, I mean, I've got the Anglo background. You know how Cameroon has been one of those countries that, it's got, several histories. First of all, we had the Germans who colonized the territory and defeated after the First World War, Brits and the French in Cameroon as some kind of a trophy. The French took the lion's share of Cameroon, and the Brits took the smaller share, and that itself, Chris, has created a serious conflict which is going on today in Cameroon between the. Chris, are you there?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Chris, it seems as if
your camera's frozen, but I'm here.
Your line is frozen.
I'm here. I'm here. Can you not hear me? Okay. So let me kick him out of the room and try to get him to come back. Wow. Okay. Oh, there he is.
Yes.
There he is.
Yes,
okay.
great.
Yeah, no, I was here, but your camera was frozen. So, no, we heard everything you were saying. You were talking about the Germans, spoils, as trophy. The French took over. They got the lion's share. And then part of Cameroon, which I think you were getting to, is the Bokassa Peninsula in particular, was an area of dispute. They went to the International Court of Justice, and Cameroon was awarded that area. But it's an Anglophone part of Cameroon as opposed to much of the country, which is Francophone. Is that where we were at?
Yes, I mean, the part which you're referring to is called the Bakassi Peninsula.
Bakassi, sorry, I said Bokassa.
And yes, and the Bakassi Peninsula, as you said, was a disputed territory between the government of Cameroon and the Nigerian government. And of course, the end result for that, the decision was to hand over the territory back to Cameroon. But culturally, a lot of Nigerians from the other side, they identify themselves as Nigerians, depending on what they're asking for, and sometimes they would identify themselves as Cameroonians. So it's an area that physically belongs to Cameroon, but culturally belongs to both countries. So I think it's important to know that. But specifically, there is an ongoing conflict, which is between the French majority-speaking francophones, the government of La République, and the Ambazonia separatist movements. They are clamoring for the reinstallation of the former British Southern Cameroons, and they've named that territory as Ambazonia. And of course, there is a history behind that, because the territory actually gained its own independence in 1961, as opposed to the French side, which gained its independence in 1960, in the 1st of October. So there is a current crisis that is going on there, besides the Boko Haram crisis in the northern part of Cameroon, which again, Chris, links up directly with Nigeria, links up with Chad and Niger Republic. Yep. So within that territory itself, where I come from, so sometimes I say to people that it doesn't really. I mean, for me, you can locate me in any of those areas, and I'll pass there very well. So culturally, yes, it's a very common area, and that is why you've got Boko Haram, Chris, because Boko Haram doesn't see itself as a Nigerian movement. They see themselves as a regional movement. So that is why you've got folks joining from Cameroon, people joining from Chad, people joining from Niger Republic, and of course now you've got foreign fighters who are flowing in from Libya. So that's the area where I come from, Chris. Yeah, no, it's people have looked at Boko Haram for a long time as a Nigerian issue, and that may be where it metastasized and grew out of, but it's really a Lake Chad basin problem. It really affects the whole region. So it is indeed. Sadly, I mean, not sadly for you, because your profession, because you need to be active and make a living. But sadly, there's a lot of business for people with skills like yours and like mine who understand these events. And there's quite a few insurgencies and terrorism campaigns taking place across Africa. The good news is that much of it's concentrated. It's not good for the people in that belt, but the good news for the continent as a whole is much of it's concentrated in one belt in the Sahel. Running from east to west, but it is. I don't want to say it's a growth industry, but there's certainly plenty of work to work in this area. Is there not? I think it is indeed. You've got the issues that are operating within the Lake Chad basin, as we've mentioned before. But of course, Lake Chad also leads you directly to the Liptako-Goma region, which is the Sahel, where you've got the triangle of Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger Republic, and so you've got Al-Qaeda. A movement there supported by the Islamic State of the Greater Sahel, which is an affiliate of ISIS. But now you've also got in Mozambique, which is in East Africa, Chris, where you've got another jihadist organization emerging from there. That is quite new compared to Boko Haram and Al-Shabaab in Somalia, because they've just been there for the past 3 years. That there's been an intensification and a building of its capacity. But you move from there, you've also got the new Islamic State of East Africa that operates between the borders of Uganda and Congo DRC. So that is also an area that one is got to watch. But I'm glad you mentioned the whole idea of poverty. And one of the things that we see, which is quite different from what happens in the West, is that you've got a lot of people who are drawn into these groups because that is the only alternative source of life and living. But also the issue of the territorial dynamics. This is a very complex region. I mean, it's not like Mosul and Raqqa, which you can easily use your air power and aerial surveillance to wipe out, ISIS caliphate. No, this is a much more complex forest region, which it's a lot more difficult for these governments, to have the kind of capacity that will enable them defeat this movement. And I say to people that in spite of the challenges that the Nigerian government and the Nigerian army encounters, I think, looking at the way that they've conducted the war against Boko Haram, they've done pretty well on their own. Because, look at the Islamic State. The Islamic State could only be defeated with a huge coalition of, the US, Russia. You can vary with what role Russia played.
Sure.
But it was only down to a coalition. But when you look at what is happening in Nigeria, of course, people will say to you, you've got the multinational joint task force. But this is no way compared to the kind of technological capacity that the US and the UK and all their partners, deployed in Iraq and Mosul. And one of the things which I think is important here is, a time to kind of reflect on how international countries, could form a coalition to help Nigeria, to help Niger, help Chad to get rid of Boko Haram. Until then, I think they would remain a force to contend with. They would use the usual guerrilla tactics. Recently, a UN helicopter was shot down. I don't know if you heard about that.
Yes.
Well, it wasn't shot down; it was shot, and the UN decided to suspend its activities in some areas in northern Nigeria where it delivers humanitarian service. And I was saying to a colleague of mine that this plays very much in the hands of Boko Haram and the Islamic State of West Africa Province. This is another faction of Boko Haram. Yeah. The reason why they've done that is because most of the time these organizations would ambush convoys and steal food from these convoys. So what the UN has been doing is to fly the food and other basic necessities to IDP camps, removing that threat of ambush from the group. And the shooting down is to discourage the UN from continuing to use the helicopters and go back where Boko Haram wants them to go. Mm-hmm. So this is an organization, as you know, Chris, which sometimes a lot of people underestimate its capacity, but and that is one of the reasons why I think it's important for the global war on terror to mean what it says, rather than it just being a Nigerian and Lake Chad problem.
Oh, it's definitely not just that. That's I'm with you on that one. But one thing I think we can probably say is pretty consistent across all of these areas is in most cases, not all, but in most cases. And it's different than, say, terrorism in Germany or Greece or Italy that we saw in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and even in the 90s, like the Red Army faction, the November 17, the Red Brigades, those sorts of things. But what we see in Africa, and not just in Africa, in other places, especially in the developing world, is there seems to be a preponderance of these sort of activities for insurgencies and or terrorist groups to get a foothold and draw people to them and work for them when there is either weak governance, a lack of governance, or failed governance. Do you think that's a reasonable comment?
I think it's a reasonable comment, Chris. When you look at especially when you're talking about locations, mm-hmm. where these groups decide to locate, majority of their activities, they locate them in areas which are ungoverned spaces, where there is very little or non-existent of state authority. And due to the vastness of this region, it makes it very difficult for a government to develop these areas as much as it does in other cities. So it becomes a very, some kind of a fertile ground for these jihadist groups to continue to hide. Because, there is no way the Nigerian government or the Cameroon government or even the entire region could develop these areas to a point where they make it inhabitable for the jihadists. Yeah. This is really vast. And the nature of this means these jihadist groups continue to use these territories and recruit people from these areas. These are people who don't have any business to do with, the capital. They have no business to do with, the main government. They live their peasantry lives. They rear their cattle. These people live on agricultural products. So, they are vulnerable because they are cut away from the mainstream states. Mm-hmm. And that is why we've got to be able to distinguish what it means when we say we can defeat a terrorist organization. What does that really mean for a state? Does it mean defeating them in the sense of, taking them out of the main cities? Does it mean defeating them in the sense of reducing their capacity to carry out certain attacks? We've got to make distinction in that, because the moment you think that because they continue to carry out attacks, it means they are winning, then you miss the point. Because the whole idea of jihadist groups like Boko Haram is to continuously give the impression to the people that it is recruiting that they are doing well.
Yeah.
So it's a narrative for them to continue to carry out spontaneous attacks, even when these attacks don't really mean much to them. So, Chris, you're right. Governance and lack of a suitable authority within an area is a big driver. It's one of those big drivers where these groups take advantage of. But how do you resolve that? Through the step-out strategy. The Nigerian government has tried the empty the village strategy and call it peace. But that hasn't worked. Why hasn't that worked? Because most of the people in these areas where Boko Haram occupies, these are people who do not see themselves living in the cities. They can't find jobs in the cities. They don't have the level of education that is required to get a conventional job. A lot of them have their family members as members of Boko Haram and this jihadist organization. Just like, I'm sure you guys experienced in Afghanistan. You're talking about brothers, sisters, cousins, friends. These are the people that are fighting against the Nigerian government. And the Nigerian government needs information from these very people. Mm-hmm. So you can see the constraint. And that is why in the early days, in the early years, the US has been there, the UK has been there to advise. But I can tell you what, there is no good outcome out of that, because this has to be dealt with using local strategies. And that is where I think the government should be focusing on now.
No, I think you absolutely hit on something very important. Let me do a bit of housekeeping very quickly here, which I need to do periodically in the stream. So, folks, thank you for tuning in. You're listening to Chris Wyatt Africa on the Indaba Africa channel here on YouTube. My special feature guest today is David Otto, who is the Director for Counterterrorism at SISO, Step In, Step Out, as he explained just a short while ago. And we're talking about counterinsurgency, counterterrorism across Africa. And what I'd like to do is just acknowledge somebody. I don't do this often for special features. I usually just do this during my regular live stream when I say hello to everybody in the chat. But there's someone named Kaupi1 that says, greetings from the Gambia. Well, thank you, Galpi, for tuning in from the Gambia. If you're listening on a mobile, a tablet, a PC, whatever you're listening on, thank you so much for that. I don't get a lot of viewers from the Gambia, so really glad. I don't know if that's somebody you know, David, or they just read about the stream, but whatever the case is, thanks for coming in the stream. So let me shift a little bit here and talk about some of the points you're making. I think we probably can come in agreement on this. What seems to get lost by governments all too often when it comes to an insurgency and or terrorism is centers of gravity, whether it's their own center of gravity or the insurgent or the terrorist group's center of gravity. Now, sometimes that can be leadership. Sometimes it can be resources. Sometimes it's the narrative that has to be changed. But famously for the United States, we lost the plot, I should say, in Vietnam because of Tet. So at Tet, the U.S. government told everyone that the Viet Cong was destroyed, and it was. The Viet Cong and its insurgent group was completely wiped out, was never a factor militarily or politically again after that. But it didn't matter because the North Vietnamese correctly identified. We've got a super chat there from Marinus Bota. Thank you so much for that 7 Rand super chat, Marinus. Really appreciate it. That must mean he's enjoying the stream. So thank you for that. But when the Viet Cong was defeated, the images of the U.S. Embassy being attacked by the Viet Cong and CIA and Marines trying to defend the embassy as it's being shot up, whole entire country lit in flames, our center of gravity became public opinion. And I don't think the U.S. realized that. And so that's an example of what I'm talking about. Now, you've talked about some of these different, you just briefly touched on, but some of these different strategies and approaches. And we've seen the Hamlet's approach in Vietnam where he tried to protect villages. In Rhodesia, the Rhodesian government tried to protect villages in the rural areas, particularly in Mashonaland. And it didn't work effectively. You alienate the local population. You don't really create the security that you're seeking to create. And now, what I was getting at earlier with the lack of governance is when I was at U.S. Africa Command and the chief for the Southern Africa region, I warned U.S. Africa Command that piracy would find its way from the shores of Somalia down to the coast of Mozambique because there's no naval presence and there's lots of lucrative targets, and it's going to happen. I also warned them that it's fertile ground because of very poor governance or absence of governance entirely in Cabo Delgado in the northern part for Islamic groups that have interest to work their way down there from the east coast of Africa. And now we've seen both those things occur. It's kind of frustrating, but I think the centers of gravity, both for whoever's against you and yourself, are really important things that governments kind of miss a lot. Would you agree or disagree with that?
I do agree. Every time somebody loses a football match, the blame goes to the midfield, and the military in this sense is always the midfield. And what we fail to look at specifically is the role that the government itself plays, the political elites, and this is a reflection because what we find, especially in Africa, is the same thing which you've talked about. The U.S. has experienced in Vietnam, they've experienced in Afghanistan. This idea that culture is strategy for breakfast. You've got to be able to contextualize the cultural dynamics. You cannot protect people that don't want to be protected. Sometimes the military goes into counterinsurgency with the belief, which is actually a misbelief, that the local people are victims. The local people see them as perpetrators. And you've got to be able to get that very correct, because when you mix those up, you feel that you're protecting the local population, but the local population sees you as a representative of the government. And they believe that the reason why they have this high level of disenfranchisement, high level of poverty, or high level of underdevelopment is because the government has looked the other way. And you, as a military that comes there for counterinsurgency, you are seen as a representative of that state, and you think you're trying to protect the people, but the people see you as a direct threat. And that is where there is a gap in information sharing or information gathering, because you don't get the information. I often say to people, the military is like the fish, and the people are like water. And this is a quote from Mao Zedong. So I think what is important here is to understand that in order for the military or the government to be able to have any kind of effective counterinsurgency strategy, it's important to understand what the people really need. Chris, if to solve the problem right, you've got to solve the right problem. And sometimes we think the problem is removing the people and taking them to the cities. And we don't understand the disruptions that you cause in the ecosystem of those people. You don't understand, the long-time impact that they've experienced before the military arrives. So what we've constantly seen is a one-size-fits-all kind of counterinsurgency strategy. Let's do what the Americans did in Afghanistan. Let's do what they've done in Iraq. Let's do what they've done in Syria. But it doesn't work like that, because the people are different. The environment is different. The reasons why they join, why they step in is different. And therefore, the reason why they're going to step out of that has to also be different. And that is why the key role that we do as part of our Step In, Step Out project is to get stakeholders, to get governments to understand the uniqueness of insurgency movements within their boundaries, and to understand that, of course, you can have good practices, you can copy good practices from other countries. You've got to be able to tailor it to your local dynamics in such a way that you're not taking one step forward and take 10 steps backwards. And that is what we're experiencing in most cases in Africa. And that is why people like us are continuously engaging with African governments to understand that counterinsurgency is a global problem, but the solution is local.
No, absolutely. And I think that's a great point. And I'm really glad you guys focus on that, because I think even when you see organizations, global organizations, sponsoring insurgencies and or terrorist groups at different places, you have to have the local context. They may get support from abroad, but that doesn't mean their ideals match. I remember that that Al Qaeda was trying to get a foothold in Somalia, and the Somalis didn't want anything to do with them. They didn't want anything to do with them because they don't share the same views, the same values. The only thing is they had similar, ideas about getting rid of certain influence in Somalia. But the Somalis wanted Al Qaeda out too. They didn't want these mostly Arabs coming in and trying to dictate to them. So Al Qaeda was kind of rebuffed. They were like, "Excuse me," they were surprised that they weren't wanted there. But I think you've hit on something that's very important. Is the local piece of this really makes a difference because. For instance, the reasons why there's Islamic-inspired events going on in Cabo Delgado may have similarities with things that are taking place in Somalia, but it's very different. The local solution is very different. You may be able to solve it. I'm not saying this particular case. We might be able to solve it much easier with the application of time and or money or resources than you can say in Somalia. You can pour all the money and resources into Somalia, but until the Somalis sort themselves out, none of us can solve their problem. But the Mozambicans may be able to ameliorate the situation, say, in Cabo Delgado, with better governance, just as an example.
I mean, you make a very solid point there, Chris. And one of the things which I've advised the Mozambicans to do very early is to, of course, design a specific strategy, look at the inroads, why do we have a movement of this nature within Mozambique? Then go to your neighbors, talk to the Nigerians. The way that the Mozambicans the Mozambique terrorist organizations are now, the terrorist group is now behaving, reminds me of the maneuvers that the Boko Haram used to carry out in 2014, when they declared Goza as, the Islamic Caliphate. Remember, Chris, that it was the same time that the Islamic State declared its caliphate in 2014. So what I'm saying here is that the Mozambicans have to be very, very careful with the way that they use and they deploy the military to deal with this group. Because one of the things that the Nigerians learned very late and with a lot of cost in terms of human and material is when the insurgency began, they deployed the military. And the military had no idea of who belonged to a terrorist organization and who didn't belong to any terrorist organization, who was in charge of accessorial kind of duties, who was helping them, who was giving them water, who was feeding them. And everybody was kind of, if you look like a terrorist, then you're a terrorist. And what, yeah, of course. I mean, what that meant.
I look like a 19th century abolitionist, to John Brown. I wonder what people say about me.
Yeah, so you had this generalized profiling, which backfired to the Nigerian military because they had no training. The military in the past has not been trained on counterinsurgency and effective, strategic communication with the local population. So the Mozambicans have got to look at these, some of these lessons, and then look at some of the specific push and pull factors that are existing within their own environment. Of course, I was talking about Mozambique the other day, and I made it very clear that this is an area which has a lot of resources. And I think we need to speak about that as well, Chris, because terrorist organizations seem to locate themselves in areas where they can easily survive. Yeah. Areas where they can carry out kidnappings of international staff, areas where they can, they can easily get natural resources. And that's what we've seen with Boko Haram. That's what we continue to see with Al-Shabaab, with Al-Qaeda in Mali, and now with the Mozambicans, where you've got Cabo Delgado being one of the richest oil and gas regions in the country. So the point we're making, Chris, is you've got to look at your specific dynamics. And that is what we advise. Look at the key driving factors within your local state. Get lessons from the countries where you see some similarities. And for me, I think the Nigerians have to up their game and develop something that the rest of Africa has to be able to copy from them if they wish to.
No, I agree with you. I do a little more housekeeping here. So people are super chatting again. Renier Duplessis has given 180 Rand super chat. Says we need more interviews like this for sense making. Well, I don't disagree. That's part of the reason why I'm doing the channel and trying to bring this sort of discourse for people to view and talk about. So I agree with you on that one. Listen, so David, I think you know that in the early stages of, because the multinational joint task force had existed for a number of years, but it was kind of moribund. And the effort went around 2013, 2014, 2015 was to get it re-energized and use it as a mechanism to deal with Boko Haram. And at that time, I actually traveled to Abuja, where I represented the U.S. mission in the African Union, and then later to Cameroon, in fact, for the second conference, as we tried to gin it up and set the terms, conditions, the command and control, the status of the forces, and all that. But now this is the part where hopefully I don't lose Nigerians in the audience, because I'm not very kind to Abuja when it comes to Boko Haram. What I've said for years is that, in my view, I'm saying this because I want to see if you agree or disagree, and if you disagree, we'll see where it goes. So not to be inflammatory, but maybe the Nigerians will take it differently. But what I've said for years with Boko Haram, part of the problem with Boko Haram is that as long as it was a problem in the north, which is what it was a localized problem. It benefited presidents in Abuja because it was a problem that kept their governors in the north occupied and distracted from, asking for things from Abuja, and it didn't really affect the central government or the south. And when the government of Nigeria, and I sat there and listened to senior leaders from the government say, Libya, all these weapons, the only reason we have Boko Haram is because of weapons from Libya. Well, that's not honest, because it predates Libya. That did exacerbate the problem, yes. But the reason why when they killed a bunch of Boko Haram's senior leaders, including the guy that inspired the movement, the reason that they resorted to insurgency and counterterrorism and the way they armed themselves is they went after police stations, and the police ran away, and they broke in and stole all their arms, shotguns and handguns and stuff like that. And then when they finally sent the 6th Division from the Nigerian forces up against them in the northeast, they were shellacked. And a lot of soldiers dropped their weapons and ran away. So people just picked them up. My point is that the problem in Nigeria was, in many respects, in my view, self-inflicted by poor governance, poor decisions, and it had an impact. And then, of course, it metastasized across the region. So I don't know if you agree or disagree with that, but I thought I'd throw that out on the table, a little bit of red meat to have a conversation about.
I think you're right, Chris. For every big disaster, there is a small gain, and when you categorize insurgency movements and the activities, there is always somebody who is making some profit out of it. It's the war economy. Mm-hmm. And this is not limited to Boko Haram. It's not limited to Al-Shabaab. You talk about the Taliban, you talk about Al-Qaeda core. All these movements have created a war economy. And this war economy benefits a lot of countries. I mean, of course, the US President Donald Trump talked lately about the U.S. getting oil from Syria, and these are all beneficial things which governments always have when it comes to insurgency. Now, talking about the regional implication and how Boko Haram has been able to move from a very small machete wielding lads in the streets to a huge jihadist organizations linked with Al-Qaeda and ISIS. I mean, they are even considered to be the most deadliest terrorist organization in the world. And yes, the Nigerian president has made claims that these weapons are coming from Libya. But as you said, Boko Haram began as a local entity. And as time went on, as strategies were gotten wrong, as the Nigerian government was trying to learn on how to defeat this organization, things really went bad, especially between the period of 2009 when Mohammed Yusuf, the founding leader, was killed in the custody of the police, and to the time when Boko Haram began targeting police officers. So you've got to understand that the trajectory of Boko Haram began by Boko Haram targeting politicians, mm-hmm. because politicians were seen as people who failed to develop the state, and they failed to honor some of their promises that they made to the founding leader, Mohammed Yusuf, of Boko Haram, of honoring the movement with the Sharia state in Borno. Mm-hmm. Because of the fact that that promise wasn't made, they went after politicians. And normally when you go after politicians, what happens is politicians will start carrying police with them. And once you carry police with you, the police became the target. Yep. And that is why the police were very quick to eliminate the leader. And by eliminating the leader, it then exacerbated the problem where the military was called in. And when the military was called in, they were in no man's land. They didn't know the people. They didn't know the culture. They didn't know who belonged to where, as I mentioned earlier. And that is how the whole issue developed, from attacking the politicians to attacking the police, and then attacking the military. And once the military realized that they were under attack, the military began to kind of retaliate against the local population. And this is how the local population formed what you call the local civilian joint task force, which was a local vigilante to deal with Boko Haram. And then Boko Haram began to attack the local population. So you can see how, from targeting specific individuals to targeting the police, how it then built up to what we have today. And in terms of the support that Boko Haram has, and that is why we talk about understanding local dynamics. Who is giving Boko Haram the weapons? Who continuously resupplies them? How do they, drink water? How do they get their food from? Where do they get their food from? How do they get their medications? Where do they sleep? Where do they get their mobile phones from? Where do they get their airtime from, their internet? So these are some of the reasons why, if you want to deal with a terrorist organization, you've got to look at the local dynamics, because they don't get their mobile phones from Syria or from the Islamic State.
Yeah.
They get it from the local environment.
That's right.
So you've got to be able to bring up a counterinsurgency strategy that deals with all these local elements. But Chris, I mean, the biggest problem that the Nigerian government faces now is the military reconciling with the local population in such a way that the local population will see Boko Haram as an enemy. At the moment, there are issues concerning, Boko Haram's, cultural makeup. Most of the Boko Haram top leaders are Kanuris. Mm-hmm. And the area where Boko Haram operates means that, the Nigerian government would need the Kanuris to comply. But, you can't comply, you can't get, the kind of information you want to get from people that see these movements as, my brother, my sister, my wife, my husband. Nobody's going to give you information to kill their son or their husband. So this is why I make it very clear that you've got to win the hearts and minds of the local people. Mm-hmm. And when it comes to counterinsurgency, the people win and the military fights. That's how I see it.
No, I think it's a very good point. A lot of this seems to get lost on governments, and they relearn lessons. There are so many lessons that we've learned from counterinsurgency campaigns dating back over the last century that people should apply. And I think you've touched on some of the most important ones. Everything's local. You really have to understand the local context. If you're coming from the metropolitan into the region and you don't know what's going on, you don't have that local knowledge, that's not going to work. It's just not going to work, no matter whether you're politicians, your military, your police, security services. I had a student a couple of years ago at the Army War College, a Nigerian officer, a colonel, one of my students, and he asked me to be his thesis advisor for a project. And he approached me and he said he wanted to do a paper on the use of vigilantes in counterinsurgency in Nigeria. And I said, that's a fascinating topic, but your audience is limited. Why don't you look further and look at, Sri Lanka and look at some other places and look at the use of vigilantes in counterinsurgency in a global sense? And he did. And let me tell you, this was the easiest thesis I had to be an advisor for. He was on his game. He did great research, great sources, great conclusions, great critical thinking. If all of my students had been that easy to be an advisor for, my life would have been far simpler at the War College. But he wrote a brilliant paper on the use of vigilantes in counterinsurgency, and it was inspired, of course, by what was happening in the northeastern part of Nigeria, which you just alluded to.
I think you make a very good point there, Chris. The local vigilantes, the civilian joint task force, I spent a lot of time with them in 2015. Mm-hmm. Going around to understand their modus operandi, speaking to some of the members who had volunteered to join the group. And two things came out of that. First of all, this local civilian joint task force came as a result of a cohesive strategy by the then leadership of the Nigerian army. It wasn't some kind of let us help the army to do this. It was a kind of self-help for the local youths, mm-hmm. because the army had arrived in an environment that they had no clue about, and people were ambushing the military left, right, and center. And the only way the military could survive in the environment is to just bundle people who look like the usual suspect and eliminate some of them. And this is how the local guys that I met said to me, they formed the Civilian Joint Task Force because if the Civilian Joint Task Force wasn't created at the time, they wouldn't have seen the end of their lives. It would have been a disaster for them. So you've got to understand the context in which the CJTF was created, and what that means is that up until now, which you've got the Nigerian government, trying to reintegrate them, trying to train them. Most of the members or some of the members of the CJTF still have loyalty to the jihadist organization. So you've got an issue of information gathering and counterintelligence, where you're being provided with one set of information, and your information is being given to these people that have pre-existing relationships with the Civilian Joint Task Force. So I'm sure that his research, I don't know if he looked into that, but these are some of the things that we've advised, the Nigerian government to really look at, understand the dynamics of the Civilian Joint Task Force, because they are one of the most reliable source of intelligence for the military. But at the same time, they are the weakest link for the military because they still preserve that pre-existing relationship. They still know some of the leaders of Boko Haram, and there is no checks and balances. There is no way that the military can really make sure that the information that they are giving them, it's the kind of information that it's not being counterproductive to some of their work. But I have to admit that there's been a difference. There has been a lot of services which have been given to the Civilian Joint Task Force to increase their capacity, to be able to win the hearts and minds of the local people. But the biggest, controversy to that is when local people are made officials, when it comes to intelligence gathering, they lose that capacity to gather the information. I don't know if you've dealt with this before, but when people are local, they can easily give you information. As soon as you make them official, it becomes a profession, and they can't be trusted any longer. They don't have that same environmental advantage to gather information because now they are wearing uniforms. Now they are driving in marked vehicles. So those are some of the difficulties which the Nigerian government is facing right now, dealing with the Civilian Joint Task Force. But I'm happy that your colleague from Nigeria was looking at this.
Yeah, no, and it's not just that, David. I'm sure you would agree with this. You just didn't get a chance to say it, but it's not just if you bring them in officially. It's also when you deal with them and people are aware of it in an official capacity. So even if you don't co-opt them, they are seen as co-opted by locals, and they lose their credibility with local people in villages and towns, and you lose that source of information that may have been very valuable. That's why I always get a chuckle when I hear people like Snowden and what's his name there from WikiLeaks there, that guy, I can't think of his name right now.
Yeah,
Julian Assange.
Julian Assange.
Yeah, Julian Assange. When they're like, well, no one deserves to have secrets. Of course, governments and people need to have secrets. How do you negotiate if you don't have a negotiation in secret? Because people, if they know you have no army and you're bluffing, then they're just going to roll over you, So you have to have secrets, and so governments have to have the ability to talk to people in privacy, so that they can find out things and negotiate things. Otherwise, soldiers go in blind. We see that with the Nigerian forces. They get up there, they really don't know the area, and it's a disaster as a consequence. Now, someone talked about. They mentioned Martin van Vuuren was mentioning Sierra Leone and gold mines, and I think he was talking about the RUF and Fode Senko and such. I want to ask you a question about step in, step out. Now, with the RUF and with child soldiers and such, this big issue that was taking place there in Sierra Leone, there was a huge effort to reintegrate the child soldiers, but also members of RUF back into civil society. And this was a huge undertaking with the need for psychological counseling and also for trade training so that they actually could have jobs and things like that. Now, does step in, step out play any role in helping governments formulate strategies on how to reintegrate former terrorists and or insurgents into civil society? Is that part of what you offer?
Yes, I think that's one of the things that we offer, but we look at it from a different perspective, Chris.
Okay.
what we found out is, the customary way of doing things has been reintegrating child soldiers, people that have been established as, being recruited by terrorist organization, by, bandits or insurgent groups. In Sierra Leone, you spoke about it. We currently have a scenario with Boko Haram that they've recruited more than 5,000, and I mean 5,000, not 500. Yeah. More than 5,000 young fighters, and some of these young people will need to be reintegrated. But the way that step in, step out looks at this is, what we found is that when you reintegrate just the child soldiers, what happens is you kind of give a priority to people that become child soldiers, and other children that are not child soldiers,
they get nothing.
See them, yes, they get nothing. And so, at step in, step out, what we do, we say to the state, deal with the children that are not yet child soldiers, and use that as an example to show the kids that are child soldiers that they can become better. And then you then move in to deal with the reintegration and, disengagement or deconstruction of the child soldiers. Mm-hmm. Because, what you do is you buy the acceptability of the local communities that will eventually receive these children back in their communities. But what you don't do is, and that we don't do in step out, is to focus on the reintegration of terrorists without speaking to the state about the reintegration of people that are as vulnerable as terrorists were vulnerable, but who need some kind of a source of living. So you don't. It's kind of you don't give the guy who carried the gun a priority over the guy who didn't carry a gun, and that is the new model that we're working on, because by talking to some of the young people in the streets and talking to some of the people that have engaged in terrorism, in insurgency in Nigeria, in various areas in Africa, what they say is there seems to be an attention that is driven to people that belong to terrorist organizations. And there is less attention and less services being given to people who don't join these groups. So that is what we're looking at, Chris. I mean, we're looking at some kind of a dual system, a system that looks at the people that are vulnerable and deal with them and use them as examples, to show the people that have been recruited in the forest, in the bushes as child soldiers or as full-grown terrorists, that, okay, if I leave this area, I could be like that guy who didn't carry a gun. I mean, that's the strategy we are using, Chris.
Interesting. So very quickly, David, we kind of got a late start because of the communications technology issue there. So we lost about 15 minutes and then we got broken again. Can you go a bit longer? I usually ask my guests if they go longer. We're at the top of the hour. Can you go another 15 minutes or 20 minutes?
Yes, that's fine. Yes, that's
okay,
great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But let me do a little housekeeping. It's the top of the hour here. We've been on for just a little over an hour. So ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to Chris Wyatt Africa on the Indaba Africa channel here on YouTube. My special guest today is David Otto, who is the director of counterterrorism at Step In, Step Out. And we're talking about insurgency, counterinsurgency in Africa specifically. So welcome to the stream. I appreciate everybody coming in here. So now, David, what I want to do is, there was a couple things in chat, so I want to cover them very quickly. So Christo Hoyer, who is in Saudi Arabia, he's from South Africa. Christo is, by the way, Christo, thanks for the super chats. He's a reliable super chatter, so we appreciate that. But he said, can you ask David what his view is with regards to social media influencing recruiting forces and how that's monitored by governments? He wants your view and then he wants my view. So I'll let you go first, David.
Yeah. I mean, social media is I mean, I'm going to say it's a new area. But the use of social media in terms of influencing radicalization, social media in terms of propaganda by terrorist organizations is a huge concern. I mean, one of the biggest threats that we face today is cyber terrorism, and cyber terrorism comes in various forms. It comes in the form of people being radicalized online, people being sent messages online. We've seen situations in Africa where jihadist organizations, would raise money through social media. They would, put some of their narratives through social media. But when it comes to some of the countries in Africa where I've been to, there is a limited capacity for jihadists to recruit through the social media, because some of these very remote villages I'm talking to you about don't have lights. They don't have the sort of development. A lot of them don't have smartphones. Mm-hmm. So the impact of the recruitment, in terms of using social media, is very limited in these regions. And that brings me to the point of where communications from the state doesn't really get to this area. So, for example, when the government is announcing that we've defeated Boko Haram, or we've made a lot of progress, people in these areas don't get this information because they don't have the infrastructure or the technical infrastructures, no radios, no TV, no internet. That is not their priority. So, in as much as you would see a lot of online radicalization in the West, and what I call the hybrid form of radicalization, meaning people that are recruited online and then met face to face or physically and been recruited. In Africa, we have a significant number of people that are just recruited because they walk the streets without jobs. They live in very remote areas and need some alternative ways of living. So in terms of developing a counter-social or counter narrative through social media, that is not there yet in Africa. But it's not to say, it shouldn't be developed. In most areas, in the urban cities, recruitment of terrorists, of jihadists is not very high. People that live in the cities don't want to go and live in the forest. Nobody wants to go and live in an area where there are no lights. You have to move up camps from camps every day. You receive offensive aerial strikes every day. So yes, Chris, what I need to let your the gentleman who asked the question to understand is, yes, there is a huge influence of social media, and governments need to be able to begin to prepare infrastructure-wise, to understand how these messages are being transmitted. But for now, in terms of looking at the local dynamics, you don't have to worry about social media recruitment strategies in Africa that much. Yeah. However, there are lots of groups that are using social media to raise their funds. They're using social media to transmit their messages. Mm-hmm. Boko Haram does that very well. But if you want to compare that to the West, to the US, where we have a lot of social media platforms, then you can look at that. For example, in the UK, we pay a lot of attention on online radicalization, but not in Africa.
Yeah. So let me. There's a few things here. So let me first. I'm going to mention what Christo just said in response to your response. And he's the person that asked the question, and then a couple little cheeky things in the comments I want to cover really quickly, and compliments, and then I'll answer my answer to the question. So before I go on, so Christo said, what would David, he says, okay, what David is missing is the majority of urban residents being recruited also have contact with rural families. And there's a lot of truth to that in South Africa. A lot of people have ties to the rural areas, and I think that's the point he's trying to make. But I don't know that you missed it. I just don't think that we really got into it. Would you agree?
I think I did mention it, Chris.
Okay, I don't think you missed it.
What I said, there is not a lot of incentive for people that live in urban areas to go and join terrorist organizations in the rural areas. Mm-hmm. Very few of that happening in the African setting, especially when you talk about Boko Haram, when you talk about Al-Shabaab. Now, of course, there are cases where people leave urban cities and join these organizations, but this is just at the fringe of the number of people that we've seen been recruited, are not really people from the cities. They are people that live in very vulnerable areas in the villages. And, of course, it comes back to the point which you made very early, Chris, that it is not about being poor that people join jihadist organizations. But, especially when you talk about the leadership, the leadership of these organizations may come from the city. But when you talk about the fighters, the people that are at the lower edge of the organization, most of these guys or these young children are recruited from the rural areas.
Yeah. No, it absolutely drove me nuts here because I've been dealing with terrorists and it was part of my vocation as a counterintelligence officer for over 3 decades, and was nearly killed by the Red Army faction in 1985, which I think some people are aware of. just escaped just barely. It was good fortune. Serendipitous that I was not there when the bomb exploded.
Mm.
But no, I mean, the Red Army faction didn't exist because the people who were in it were poor. In fact, they were mostly privileged, wealthy people. The Irish Republican Army didn't exist because the Irish were poor, relatively speaking. They existed because they didn't want the English ruling them, and that was the only weapon they had because they were weak. So, it's the same thing in Africa. Not everybody joins an insurgency because they're poor. It might be a contributing factor. And I hate when people try to simplify. It's kind of like, well, the Gini coefficient is so high, and because there's wealth disparity, that's why there's social discord. Yes and no. You have countries with wide wealth disparity where the population is fine because people aren't living in poverty. They just aren't nearly as wealthy as a small number of people. Anyway, but let me get back to the comments. So Yanni van der Veld, who's a big supporter for the channel, said, it's funny how both of you have the world in your background. And let me explain that. And David can disagree if he wants, but the reason I have the world behind me and he has a globe behind him is because we think strategically and we're thinking about these issues in a global context, right?
I agree with you.
Okay. All right. Good. All right. Now let me. And Toons said, Chris Wyatt, amazing guest. So Toons thinks you're a great guest. So I think a lot of people have that sentiment. So
thank you, Toons.
Just want to share that with you very quickly. Now, my response back to this is not in disagreement at all with David. We have to be careful here. It's like the Mutual Admiration Society. We pretty much agree on most things here, but not much discord on this conversation. But when I look at social media, and this is what I've been saying since the advent of it, is that. And I remember I was into computers for a long time before this, and so I kind of felt this as it was coming and saw it coming. But it's a tool. It's a tool. Just because it exists doesn't mean that jihadists or insurgents will use it effectively. It can be used effectively. But David touched on one thing. There's a lot of places where people don't have access to this, and so it's not even useful there at all. But let me talk about this. So it complicates things for governance. It makes the world of providing security and a safe and secure environment for your citizens much more complicated when people have access to social media and multiple social media platforms that spring up left and right. You got Twitter, then Parler comes up. Used to have MySpace, and then then YouTube comes up. When you've got all these different ones that come around, it complicates things for governments. But you know what? That's too bad. That's for governments to sort out. They have the resources, and if they don't, they need to collaborate with others who have them. And we see that in intelligence in much of the world. But it also makes these folks vulnerable. Listen, I worked at the National Security Agency, folks. Do you really think you're secure online? Keep thinking that. Enjoy it. Enjoy that comfort because it's not real. The social media, when they use it, it makes them vulnerable. They can be located. Their assets can be targeted. People can go after them. They can be monitored to follow what they're doing. So it is a challenge, but it also creates a vulnerability. So that's something people forget. And then I would say that the two usefulnesses of social media that are most impactful from my perspective for insurgents and terrorist groups are that the speed of dissemination of information. Wow. No longer do you have to send a runner from a village on a camel or on horseback or in a truck across the desert or through the jungle or through a city. You don't have to rely on a telephone line that can be tapped by the government, or even you have all sorts of mechanisms to disseminate information now, and you can even do it encoded, which makes it even more challenging. So the speed of dissemination is a big impact. You can get a message anywhere on the planet, anywhere, in a matter of microseconds and disseminate your message, good and bad. So that's important for these groups. And the second thing is that those who are savvy, because you can do that, have the ability to extend their reach well beyond where they should be able to. Ladies and gentlemen, I hold in my hand more processing power than the entire Apollo program that put Apollo 13, Apollo 11 into space. We landed a man on the moon with less processing power than I hold my hand with this Samsung S9 Galaxy telephone. Can you imagine that? And this is something that anybody can get around the world and hook up to a network and do amazing things and do very nefarious things. So for me, the speed of dissemination is key, and the fact that you can have a far wider reach, which means you can get Confederates, you can get support, you can get help, you can go GoFundMe, disguise it as something else to raise money. Those to me are the two biggest impacts of it, but it creates a challenge for governance, but it also makes vulnerabilities. David, would you agree or disagree with those points?
Chris, I think one thing which I've always said is that where people see a 6, I see a 9. The way governments have to look at this is to understand who has the most capacity. Can the jihadists, actually compete with the government when it comes to counter narrative? No. The social media platform is there to stay. It's been established. As Chris said, there's so many different platforms where people can channel information. Now, how does the government see that? Does the government see that as a challenge, or they see that as an opportunity? It's about who puts the most narratives and who puts the most convincing narratives. You can't stop people from disseminating information. All you need to do to challenge that is to put better ones. Human beings, Chris, as you know, live by choices. If you have two choices, you go for the best one. What the government need to do is to not compete with jihadists in terms of what they put out there, but to compete in terms of what they put out there. What information is the government putting out there? Which audience is that information getting to? And how are they ensuring that that information or that message is better than the ones that jihadists are going to put online? Because you will not be able to remove all the online materials. You can't do that. It's impossible to do that. But what you can do, if when you do that, it's almost like you're trying to sweep the problem under the carpet. I think, when it comes to social media, my advice to states has always been, come up with a better narrative. Come up with something much more powerful, and your argument will win the day. Of course, you would have, a jihadist who would always come up with some of the weaknesses of the state. But that is why oppositions do exist in every state or in any liberal democracy. Opposition is there to diagnose the problem for the state. When jihadists put up these materials, look at them and think about how to counter them. That is what I advise for states to do, because the only way you can make your life better, the only way you can make your narrative better is by making it more powerful, Chris.
No, absolutely. Somebody asked a question earlier about Nigeria, and they were talking about mobile phones. Nigeria has the largest mobile telephone market in Africa. MTN alone, the South African company, which is the largest carrier there, has 92 million subscribers. That was last year. I don't know what they have now. There's, I think, like 140 million mobile phones in service in Nigeria. It's huge. It's. I think that it's really a serious concern. Let me tell you about another concern here. So let me get your thoughts on this one, David. So one of the criticisms I hold for my own government, of course, I served 36 and a half years in uniform, so I guess I'm part of the guilty crowd here. But yeah, I'm part of the guilty party. But one of my challenges is that there was a time about 15 years ago in which the term strategic communications was in favor, and then it kind of fell out of favor with governments. And I disagree, because strategic communications is not public affairs. Public affairs is trying to inform your public and influence your public and and be transparent as well. But strategic communications is trying to influence others outside your country, outside your government, influence other countries, other actors, international organizations to come to your worldview or to agree with or to make them aware of what you're doing. And I think that the U.S. government, ironically, that the U.S. is very poor at strategic communications by and large, despite the fact that we have the world's largest, I know Bollywood's big, and I know that Nollywood's big, but we have the biggest biggest movie presence, television presence, all of that, social media. Despite great success in all these things, as a nation, exporting our culture and people buying into it and such, we do very poorly, in my view, when it comes to strategic communications across the board. And this is just an example of it. If you don't have your message, you can't sell your message, you're not going to win in the arena of ideas. And I think that's a shortcoming with the United States, which in my view is ironic. We ought to be able to export great strategic communications campaigns to explain to people what we're doing, what we're not doing, why we're doing it. But I just think that we don't do a very good job of it.
Chris, I think one of the things which I've always mentioned is that counterinsurgency has brought in the need for changes in terms of strategy. Of course, you made mention of strategic communication being exclusively or perhaps influencing your enemies outside. But
not just enemies, friends too, and neutral parties.
Yes, to friends too, of course, yeah. So of course, if your enemies are inside, then you've got to also deploy your strategic communication. Mm-hmm. The conventional way of thinking is, we deploy strategic communications against the likes of Russia, against the likes of China, whom you see as your perceived enemies. But when you deal with counterinsurgency, where it's a horizontal, asymmetric environment, and where the friend can be the enemy and the enemy can be the friend, then of course, as you rightly said, you've got to deploy your strategic communication at all those levels, and that is where the use of the internet comes in. The use of messaging comes in, the use of providing people with enough information to be able to make decisions, or with the right information in front of them. So I think Just like you, Chris, we've got to, and when I say we, I mean governments that belong to the class of global counterterrorism states. Strategic communication is very important, but also the only way you can, you can have all these states collaborating and coordinating is what we do at Step In, Step Out. We advise governments on making sure that each country in the world has a national counterterrorism strategy, national counterinsurgency strategy, because that is the only way. If you have a robust, counterinsurgency strategy, that is the only way you can share with your neighbors. That is the only way you can provide a framework for other countries to come in. So if Nigeria wants the United States to come in for help, they've got to provide an environment suitable for that. They've got to have a strategy where the United States is going to look at and say, this is where we fit within this strategy. I mean, you cannot pour from an empty cup. You've got to be able to have your own strategy in place. So one of the things that we also do is to encourage a lot of African countries to develop and design a counterinsurgency strategy that is going to work within the context of the environment, that is going to work based on the resources that they have, based on the technical abilities that they have, and then look at various countries and various organizations that can come in and help them.
No, I think we pretty much agree on that. That's pretty smart. You got to have a holistic approach and a comprehensive approach, or you're not really going to be successful. And that seems to be something that governments lose sight of at times. Now, there's a question here in the comment section from Hank. I'll address it. And David, if you've got any thoughts on it, you're welcome to jump in. It's less about insurgency, but it's Hank says, Chris, in South Africa, the drug dealers are referred to as Nigerian. Not sure if that's still the case. Aren't these drug monies financing Boko Haram and others? No, I'm not aware of any financing for Boko Haram coming out of South Africa in an organized fashion. There might be individuals who want to support it, who provide it, but not in an organized fashion. But beyond that, listen, the illicit drug trade in South Africa long predates the arrival of any Nigerians in South Africa. So you've had a long history of mandrax being trafficked, cocaine being trafficked, daga being trafficked by South Africans themselves, and that market still continues in South Africa. One of the big reasons that the commandos were in use in the early part of the 1990s was to do drug interdiction. And much of what they accomplished, besides providing rural security, the commando system in South Africa, is that they did lots of drug seizures, particularly of mandrax and daga, as people tried to move the stuff around the country. So there's lots of people involved in the drug trade in any country, included in this country, in the UK. You can get all kinds of people. The Nigerians, I think, get a bum rap. Now, Christos said, yes, the Nigerians are involved in it. Go to Hillbrow. That's true, but what I'm saying is that the market is much bigger than a number of Nigerians, and it's not solely a Nigerian thing. So, any thoughts on the drug trade fueling terrorism?
Of course, part of organized crime is of course, Chris, is not just to look at the perpetrators, is to look at the consumers, especially when it comes to drugs. Everybody is guilty if a certain ethnic group or particular people are engaged in the smuggling of drugs, be it the Nigerians, be it any other country. It's an organized crime network that doesn't limit itself to those people. The people who produce the drugs consume them less. The people who traffic them also consume them less. So you've got to look at the end users as well. Yeah. But in referring to his question about the links on the South African drug cartel with Nigerians, Boko Haram, you've got to look at the ethnic differentiation.
Right.
Nigerian
is not Nigerian. There's a lot of people in Nigeria.
I mean, Nigeria is a big country, and there are lots of different ethnic groups within Nigeria. And if you want to look at I don't have the data of the guys that are involved in drugs in South Africa, but I'm sure that if you look deep, it's not going to be the same with the guys that are involved in Boko Haram in the north. So there is no link there, I think. But if there is a link, then it brings us to the discussion about the crime terror nexus. How as recently we've seen the Italian Carabinieri seizing some drugs that apparently came from the Islamic State. They say. Of course, there is no concrete investigation about that, but the Italians believe it may have come from ISIS. Mm-hmm. So there is a possibility that you still have jihadist organizations like Boko Haram dealing in drugs within their local areas. But I don't think this is linked to South Africa because, the drug triangle doesn't have a link with, Nigeria and South Africa in the north, as that may be. But that is not to say that Boko Haram doesn't deal in drugs. But, I don't think there is a link with the guys that are involved in South Africa.
Yeah, no, Gareth says, I reckon the locals love to blame the foreigners, the whites, the shade of the sky, anything but their own role they play. That's a lot of truth around the world, ladies and gentlemen. People who are responsible for nefarious activity always blame outsiders, whether they're black, white, blue, green, yellow. It tends to happen. It's a human nature to do that. You're deflecting attention away from yourself. So yeah, no, of course, this is famous now because it's taken on a life of its own. The reputation for Nigerians, earned or not, in most cases not earned. But even you see it in was it District 9, the movie, the sci-fi movie about South Africa, and the Nigerians were cooperating with the aliens. It takes a life of its own, and it's hardly fair.
But it's also crazy. It's also that when it comes to organized crime, there is a whole chain of parties that are involved, and it is not that somebody will blame someone else for one particular crime, but it's to make it very clear that the smuggling of drugs doesn't just involve the people that smuggle the drugs.
Yeah.
It involves the people that are also in the chain of that command, and that is why if you want to stop the drugs smuggling in any country, you don't just look at the source of the drugs. You also look at who are those consuming it.
Absolutely. So, David, let me just do this very quickly. So, we were originally hoping to do this as a trifecta here, a triangle, the three of us, you, myself, and Tanya Ashru.
Yes.
She was unable to make it today. Can you tell us a little bit about Tanya and what she does, and then maybe we can get people excited about coming back for another stream in the future when she's available?
Tanya is fabulous. It's a great lady with great experience. She's the CEO and director of Bulwark Intelligence, and she's a former U.S. Intelligence officer as well, and she does a lot of work looking at the security situations in Nigeria, the security situations in Africa, and it will be really great because one of the key issues that you and I have spoken about is the involvement. I mean, we're not patronizing this, but it's the involvement. It's very, very rare to find the opposite sex being involved in issues of counterinsurgency at this level.
Yeah.
And Tanwa is one of those ladies that stands out within the African context. She's somebody that I think would be very useful to your audience to hear from her, because as we say, women have a different way of analyzing things that sometimes could even be superior to the ones that we do, so I think it would be great to have her, but unfortunately she couldn't make it, as you know, due to the circumstances. But I hope that you can get her to come and speak to your audience, sometime in the nearest future, Chris.
No, absolutely. I'd love to do that. And that's why I mentioned her, because actually I think the three of us, maybe people disagree, but I think the three of us would make a really good discussion to talk about these issues. Now, she's got one shortcoming, and I should mention this up front. This is a deal breaker, by the way. I mean, I find it difficult to engage with her. She served in the Air Force, not the Army. So that's kind of a problem. I'm just saying, everybody's got their failings. I mean, she joined the Air Force. I'm just saying. So anyway, no, but seriously, no, I think it would be a great discussion to have. So, I think, David, you might be aware that South Africa continues to have electricity generation problems. And now that the lockdown has been eased in many respects, mines have reopened, businesses have gone back. And so the demand for electricity has picked up. So one of the things limiting our audience tonight has been fact that people are going through rolling blackouts. So they've got load shedding going on right now. So Moira just joined us. We've been on for an hour and a half, and Moira says, just arrived. She's asking if I'm from the U.S. and which state. I'm from the U.S. It's hard for me to say I'm from a state. I've lived all over the United States. Before the age of 17, I
Yeah.
lived in I lived in 34 of the lower 48 states, and then I've spent much of the last 30 years abroad. 23 of 36 years in the Army overseas, with 3 tours in Germany, 1 in Italy, Tunisia, Liberia, Botswana, Malawi, Nigeria, Mauritania, Uganda, and Ethiopia. Anyway, so
No.
so I live in Pennsylvania, though. I think that answers the question. So anyway, so hey, David, we're up on an hour and a half. We could probably go for hours more, but I think you probably got things to do. So I don't want to keep you too long. So what I'd like to do is, are there any thoughts you'd like to get? First off, can I get you to commit to coming back? Now, put them on the spot. Always put your guests on the spot. That's how you get them.
Of course. Chris, this is a great platform, and I think it's important for, especially in the context of counterinsurgency, I think it's the people's war. And the people have got to be able to have these kind of interactions, and their views heard. We can always answer questions which people cannot directly send to the military to respond to. People can't send these kind of questions to the police. So I think this sort of platform is very key, because the truth is that when there is an attack or an insurgency attack, the people that get more affected are the local population, and I think that having these kind of discussions with the people who should be much more concerned, just like me, yourself, and myself, it's great. It's an innovative strategy, because what we're doing, we're assisting the states in giving out information that is necessary for people to be much more aware, and I'm sure that we are building the capacity to fight against insurgency somehow by doing what we're doing. So yes, Chris, I'm very much committed to coming back and speaking to your audience when the call comes in. Hopefully I wouldn't be abroad, but even if I'm abroad, when after this COVID-19, I can still connect to the internet if I'm not in the bushes, though. But yeah, Chris.
No, absolutely. I know what you're talking about. It's funny because I'm accustomed to being in much of Africa and having dial-up speed or less, or relying on my mobile to get to the net. So sometimes it can be quite challenging. But for those who don't know, David and I have worked together in the past. Last year, he hosted a conference in London on reintegrating the
foreign fighters,
yeah, and their spouses and their children, their offspring, many of whom were the children, obviously innocents. Not all the spouses were innocent. Some of them were just as radical nuts jobs as their spouses. But reintegrating them across the world, and what does it mean? How does it get done? So we've worked together in the past, and one of the reasons I invite him on the channel is because I know he's a smart guy who thinks clearly, and he doesn't have an axe to grind or an objective. And I think if you've watched this stream, you probably would agree with my assessment there of David. And so it's great to have him on. Really appreciate it. Maybe we get Tanya on here the next time. That would be great. But hang on a second. So it's just arrived. Where's Chris from, please? Moira, did you not hear? I'm sorry. Did you not hear? I said that I'm from the U.S. I was born in Baltimore, Maryland. Okay, there's a secret. That's not a big secret.
But Chris, also, I think, let me make a point, because it's just very important about the conference which we had on the foreign. Just recently, 2 days ago, the UK government has made a ruling that one of the nationals, the British nationals, Shamima Begum, who traveled to the Islamic State, she's been allowed to come back and defend her case. We discussed this at the conference, and I spoke about the need for each country to take its responsibility from the US is responsible for all the foreign fighters who are now in the custody of the SDF forces, that's the Syrian Democratic Forces. And we've said each country has to develop their step-out strategy in order to give them the ability to reintegrate and assess the foreign fighters and see where there are needs. So I think this is a ruling that has a significant impact on what we did when you honor that invitation, because I think the world has to act as one when it comes to the dealing with this issue of foreign fighters. There is no the United States shouldn't take the entire expenses on this. I'm not trying to patronize the US, but this is one area where I think each country has to take responsibility.
No, thanks, David. Yeah, it was a great pleasure of mine to participate in that event, which was very timely. And I came back to the States, and people were like, "You were what? You were in what conference? Oh my! Tell me all about it. What happened? What happened?" It was, but for me, on the backside, still as an active officer, it was more complicated than it should have been. Legal review, judge advocate general looking, is this okay? Can you do it? What's it for? Is it for this? Is it for that? Yeah, I don't have to do that anymore. So next time you ask me to do that or ask me to get involved in a project, if I'm available, I'm available. So I don't have to worry about that. But I can't let you go. Just sorry, there's a really good question that came in.
Go ahead.
So Toons Rue said, can you ask our guest what moral high ground Boko Haram claims when addressing local supporters when they kidnap hundreds of girls from schools? Why do normal locals condone such acts? It's a complicated answer, but maybe you can give as easy an answer as possible.
Yeah, but again, I mean, the simple answer to that is Boko Haram operates in an environment where the people have very little choices to make. So they listen to Boko Haram not because they love the messages, but because that is the only way that they can survive. The human being, above anything else, would rely on survivability. And, the people that are kidnapped by Boko Haram have no choice but to listen to Boko Haram's, rhetorics. And that is why I mentioned the difficulty of the terrain that Boko Haram operates in. They operate in such a terrain that the people that are there are not exposed to any form of, contemporary, civilization, so to speak. Not to, I'm not trying to bring them down, but what I'm saying is, these people have no other choices. Boko Haram, especially the foot soldiers, come from this very, environment which, as you said, maybe you can use the word very poor environment, but strategically, they don't have access to an alternative way of living. So that is why you would see people saying, Boko Haram continuously recruits. But, the number of people that have left Boko Haram would tell you a story that, they rule by force rather than by some kind of a consensus, by the people that they rule over. So, they are not winning, but they are influencing the people that are within the environments which they operate in.
And I think to answer the question a little more fully, to take it a little further than that, is that, and not to shill for Boko Haram, God, no, not that, but the reality is that from the outset, Boko Haram, it grew out of legitimate grievances with Lagos.
Correct.
Without Lagos, with Abuja.
Abuja.
With Abuja. Sorry, that's force of habit. So with Abuja, yeah, they had legitimate grievances in which people in the north felt they're being neglected and not getting services that they expected from government. And services were delivered in other parts of the country. And it wasn't, a recent neglect. It was a long-term, decades-long neglect from their perspective. Now, I think there's legitimacy to what they said and their concerns. So I really think that that people forget about that. Now, the other piece, too, is that you have people, I mean, this is an activity that takes place across a wide swath of territory now. There are many people that don't even know that Chibok girls were ever kidnapped and they're influenced. So it's not because you know about it in London, I know about it here, people know about it in Peoria, and they know about it in Pretoria. It doesn't mean that everyone in Nigeria even knows that ever happened or that's their behavior. So like you said, oftentimes it's the only option they have. And here's the other piece, too. If Boko Haram delivers any degree of governance in many parts of the country where they're at, that's more than they had before. And it's hard to argue against that. So that's kind of what
but Chris, you've got to also let him know that the Boko Haram had a legitimate, as you said, reason for talking about having changes within the Nigerian government. But what they are providing to the people now is less than what the people were getting before Boko Haram. Yeah. So, if you say that the Nigerian government is not providing for the people, I think the experience of the people that are in custody of Boko Haram is worse than the experience that the people had before Boko Haram. Because in addition to the level of disenfranchisement, the level of poverty, they now have a terrorist organization that, could kill them any day or any night.
Let me just do some complimentary things for you, Dave, real quick, so you see these before, excuse me. You hear these before you take off. We'll close in a moment here. But Olaf says, thank you, Chris. This is always very informative. Lots of food for thought, talking about the stream with you. And then, where's this at? David, thank you for an informative show. Much appreciated, from Toons, who asked that question. And there's other comments here. I can't get them all. I just want to mention a few. People seem to have really enjoyed the stream. Folks, if you've enjoyed the stream, then next time we get David on here, be sure to come back, but tell other people about it. And if you're suffering from load shedding, there's not much I can do to help ameliorate that situation wherever you find yourself. But you can always watch it after the fact. You're welcome to watch it after the fact. Please do that. And if you've got questions or comments for David, go ahead and put them in the comment section on the video after the fact. And he can go back and look at those, or I can forward them to him. Also, David, do you have a website up for Step In, Step Out?
Well, we've not set up the website yet.
Okay.
But I've got if anybody wants to follow my work, they can always, hook me up on Twitter at Otto TGS. That's at OTTO, T for Tango, Golf for G for golf, and S for Sierra. Otto TGS, yeah.
All right, cool. Otto TGS, great. All right, folks. Anyway, so I think we'll give you one more chance to say something last, and I'm going to go ahead and close it out here, David. So before you do, my many thanks to you. I really appreciate it. It's great. I guess we're kind of working together tonight, so it's good to work with you again.
Yes.
Did I throw you aback with my long hair and beard? You probably wonder if that was really me.
Chris, you look very different. I thought, you've probably been held by, the Taliban or something for.
I was in Boko Haram custody for the last 3 months.
So thank you, Chris. I mean, this has been a wonderful session, and I do sincerely appreciate your concerns for Africa. You've been around the continent more than most of us have, and that experience is important. Talking about these issues, on the cross section of the African countries, I think it's a great initiative, and I hope that once we get the ball rolling, you'll be part of the Step In, Step Out, because Step In, Step Out is it's a global movement, I would say. It's the concept is very simple, and I hope that the audience can engage with us anytime. We're principally there to help people that have engaged themselves in insurgency groups or in terrorist organizations. We would specifically look at the reasons why you got in, and we will design programs for a step out. So, Chris, it's been wonderful, and I think one more important thing is to notice that Africa is it's a continent that Chris, you've been there most of the times, you've lived there. Everybody's welcome. This is a continent that we should really be proud of. It's got a brilliant weather. It's not like the UK where the weather changes
every 5 minutes.
Yeah. So if you want to you want to live the best, join us whenever we're traveling there, and come and live with us sometimes. And thank you, Chris. I mean, it's a pleasure, and I look forward to the upcoming session, and I'll get Tanwa involved.
Sounds brilliant. All right, David, thanks a lot. I'm going to say goodbye to my guest, David. I'll put you in the...
Thank you.
You can leave the meeting, but I'm going to put you in the waiting room.
Thank you, Chris. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, there you have it. David Otto from the Step In, Step Out organization, my special guest on the feature today. We went a bit longer than I intended to, which is great, but really good conversation. Thank you also for the very kind comments. Let me just cover a few of those very quickly here that I saw in the chat. I want to thank folks for that, and so David can hear it as well. Let me see. I'm going to miss some of these comments, but there were really some good things here. And Moira asked a question about human trafficking, drugs, and weapons. We didn't get to that. That was asked previously by somebody, but it just didn't flow into the thing. I'll try to address it here very quickly about the Chibok girls and others. Erica got in here. I don't know if she didn't have electricity for a while there. Moira says, thank you. So pleased to be here. Awesome. Knowledge is power. Many need to wake up. Much respect to both of you. Well, thank you so much for that, Moira. We really appreciate it. Glad you've joined us. Toon says that Daesh propped up the local schools, healthcare, people accept evil trade. That's true. And then Doxson's rules question was, is there much chance the girls can recover? That was for David. A number of the girls have been recovered and returned, but they're going to have lifelong trauma from what happened to them. Others were sold. And when you talk about sexual trafficking, yes, when you sell women and girls into marriage, that's sexual trafficking. That's human trafficking. So yeah, they are involved in that from that standpoint. Oh yeah, Gareth is being funny. I could send more Germans out, I guess, because they're helping with helping fix ESCOM. Variable Vision says, David Otto seems like a great guest. Please have him on again. He was a fantastic guest. Thank you. Toon says, good show. shared midweek show already on Facebook. Well, thank you. Let's see what else. We got some other good comments here. Olaf says, great interview. Excellent. Hank, great conversation. 66 likes, 0 dislikes. Well, don't worry, Marinus. My homegrown troll will show up and give a dislike having not watched the program. Just give it time. That will happen. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, this was, wow, I really enjoyed this. It's I got to say, Saturday, it's been a fun, fascinating week. This is the most fun I've had and most enjoyable, personally rewarding and professionally for me on YouTube. Most rewarding week in over a month. It's really been a lot of fun. A lot of great guests this week. I had Talon Stanford on here. Talon Stanford is a South African / American rugby player, played for the USA Eagles Sevens team from 2007 to 2009. He's a commentator on World Rugby. And that was a brilliant interview. The only shortcoming, I think, was that my microphone was somehow horked up because of Zoom, but his is perfect, and he answers the questions really well. So check out that interview with Talon Stanford. Fantastic conversation we had. And some other great guests here this week. And once here, we just had David Otto on here, a really good guest. Feel free to go back and check out past live streams, folks. Also, for those of you who've tuned in and watched my video, Hotful with Ramaphosa, the National Coronavirus Command Council, and the African National Congress. That video has just gone gangbusters, approaching 25,000 views. Thank you so much for that. Really appreciate all those views, for sharing that, and for all the content that you guys are following. It's a lot of, it's really pleasing that when folks get involved. Yeah, Joe Emilio, not to leave Joe Emilio short. Joe was a great turnout for that audience, much more than I expected. We had Marabani on here yesterday, huge turnout. We had 1,100 people tune in during the stream with Marabani, and we only went for 55 minutes. That was awesome. Yeah, thank you all so much for that. It's been a great week full of guests. I will have more guests coming up in the next week, and it should be interesting. I have more videos I'm preparing. I just did a video premiere just before this on Zambia and Rwanda, talking about the claim from Sankara, the rebel insurgent terrorist, speaking of insurgencies, who is on trial in Rwanda and now claims that not only is he collaborating with the Ugandan People's Defense Force and the Burundian intelligence services, but he also claims to have been receiving money from Edgar Lungu, the president of Zambia, who he claims gave him $150,000 to topple Paul Kagame in Rwanda, and that the total payment would be $1 million if they were successful. So anyway, interesting stuff, crazy times, and there you have it. But thanks, folks, for tuning in. I really enjoyed this stream. I hope you've enjoyed it. So get us on an interview with Lana Marks. Okay, well, I don't think Lana Marks is going to come on my channel, especially after I called her Banana Marks. Just saying. But yeah, besides, I don't know if I want to get her on. It might jeopardize my future appointment as ambassador to South Africa. By the way, Chris, how's the weather in Harrisburg? Oh, it's gorgeous. Absolutely lovely outside. Sun shining, beautiful weather. The temperature is currently, let me take a look here for folks. It is currently, no, that's got to be from this morning. Let me double check. No, it's 93. That's more like it. That's closer to 34 degrees Celsius, 35 degrees Celsius, something like that. A little warm for me, but beautiful weather outside. Anyway, folks, anything I missed here in the chat? So, should I do a stray voltage? I don't think I'm going to do a stray voltage today, guys. It's a bit late. I'm going to pass. Yes, it's a Japan jersey, Gareth. There you go. I'll stand up. It's the Brave Blossoms 2019 Rugby World Cup jersey. So you got Brave Blossoms here and the World Cup right there. There you go. This one was awesome. I really enjoyed this jersey. It was great. All right, subs climbing. Yeah, the past day, past 3 or 4 days have been climbing. In fact, since somebody mentioned it, let me take a gander and see where we're at on subscribers for the channel. Also, membership has grown, folks. We are in the 70s on membership now. 5,454 people currently subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for that, everybody. And as far as memberships and super chats, let me do that, a little housekeeping on that before we close down the stream. So when it comes to membership, we now have, oops, did we lose somebody? We lost somebody. Ooh. Somebody quit after 1 month. Shame. All right, so we have 72 because that's 73 earlier, so somebody has dropped off. Jacques became a member in the last 24 hours, as well as the Baru and Anel Hos. Thank you, and Brett Sessoms. Thank you all for joining. So much appreciated. Karen had upgraded her membership, so thank you all so much for that. But somebody quit. Well, sorry, shame to hear that. Actually, I think I know who that was. Unrelated to streams late. But Doxson's Rule gave a $5 super chat. Great discussion. Thank you both. Thank you, Doxson's. I never did get a chance to mention it when he was still on. So appreciate that. Rainier Duplessis gave 180 Rand. We need more interviews like this for sense making. Thank you for that. And Marinus Bota got everything started with a 7 Rand super chat. Hey, every super chat is important, and I thank you guys for that. Awesome stuff. Really appreciate the support for the channel, and I hope that you're enjoying it. Yeah, Chris, I'll miss Stray Voltage. Work for me in 7 hours. Yeah, I'm not gonna do the Stray Voltage, Christo. It's a bit late. Lots going on. I actually need to go do some shopping that I wasn't able to get to yesterday as I rushed back. So, by the way, anybody watch Ronaldo Jose earlier on the 3ME Bros? And or no, actually on his own program, and he was giving me grief because I was online for 5.5 hours yesterday. Anyway, yeah, that was kind of funny. Kung Fu Kenny says we'll have to rewatch. Only caught it from 70 minutes in. Yeah. Dunder Mifflin, sponsor your team. I'm not a fan of The Office. Not a fan at all. Didn't think that show was the least bit entertaining or funny, either the British version or the American version. Just not my thing. Anyway, yeah, so there you have it, folks. Anyway, but I know people love that show. Anyway, just not my bag. Didn't really enjoy it. Roman and Jeremy are great. Yeah, Gareth, that was an interesting stream with those guys. They're just kind of bantering back and forth. Interesting, amazing stream. You're welcome. Bananas don't have backbones. That's true. They're soft in the middle too. Ooh. Space Force, funny and light. I have the Space Force flag, ladies and gentlemen. For those who haven't seen it, I have the Space Force flag. That's correct. Anyway, so I'll go for a few more minutes here because since we're almost at 2 hours, let me just go ahead and. Is there any news anybody wants to talk about, an update, anything that's come up that's really got your attention or irritated you or set you off in some way? If you want to share it very quickly. Comedy series, Chris. Which one? My own or the Office? Well, every time I have Joe Emilio on, I do kind of give him some ribbing and some jokes, kind of like a mini roast. Anyway, but try to be funny with him. Bananas also have yellow bellies. That's true. They do have yellow bellies. Yes, that's an old insult for someone who lacks courage. Yellow bellies. Oh, Space Force on Netflix. I watched that. That's with what's his name from The Office. The guy of the 40-year-old virgin, whatever his name is. I can't think of his name right now, but you guys will tell me in a second. It's okay. I didn't think it was all that funny. It was decent entertainment, but I didn't find it particularly funny. It was interesting. I'll say that about it. But it really didn't do the trick for me. Just was something was interesting, nothing particularly special. So, yeah, I'm gonna go now to 2 hours just so Ronaldo can point out tomorrow that I was online for 2 hours. So we'll let him do that. Please keep the World Health Organization, the CDC, out. Out of what? Out of South Africa? I agree. Keeping the World Health Organization out of pretty much everything. It's an organization that's in the tank for the wrong people. It's run by a person who never should have been the director of the World Health Organization, a man who helped cover up outbreaks in Ethiopia when he was Minister of Health there, and causing problems for neighboring states as the disease spread into neighboring states. Yeah, no, the World Health Organization has let us down. And no matter what your view on the World Health Organization, all you have to do is look at what they've done since January 1st. In late January, after meeting with the Chinese officials, Dr. Tedros told the world that China has done an amazing job at controlling this and stopping the spread of this virus, and they should be commended for the great work that they have done. He and the Chinese Communist Party also told us in January that the Wuhan coronavirus, COVID-19, was not transmittable human to human. Oh, yeah? Then why are we wearing masks and being locked down, schools closed, businesses out of business, people hungry and starving around the world if it's not transmittable human to human? Wrong. Yeah. So, yeah, I have no objections to people being angry with the World Health Organization, the Chinese Communist Party. And as far as the Centers for Disease Control, I think that they've, for once, kind of let us down. They usually do a pretty good job, but I think they've been letting us down here with conflicting information and getting the narrative wrong and kind of losing the plot here and there. So anyway, that's a personal view. Did I see the video of the Mandela statue? Somebody sent that in the Chris Wyatt members group. I saw that if that's the one you're talking about. Where was that erected at? I don't know where that was erected at. Space Force is a brilliant idea. The real one. Yeah, Variable Vision, I agree. We did a stream on Joe Emilio's channel talking about Space Force. That was Joe and I. And he asked my thoughts on it, what it was all about. He wanted to talk about conspiracy theories, but I was happy to talk about Space Force and why it's important. And people say, what do you think people think of Donald Trump? Well, those who are objective, 15, 20 years down the road, will look back and say that Donald Trump was a visionary and he had forethought and he had a vision about how we should be doing things. And when we get folks to Mars and we get back on the moon before we get to Mars, they can thank Donald Trump for that. George Bush had a plan to get back to the moon and to Mars, and it was scuttled by Barack Obama. Trump has put it back on the table and created Space Force, which isn't going to get us to the moon. That's not what Space Force's purpose is. But Space Force is an important topic. It's an important command. It's necessary because we are already competing in space, and we need defensive measures in space for our satellites against anti-satellite warfare, for use of our direction finding equipment, and also things like the global positioning system. All of these things play a role, not to mention all the space directly around our planet is important for someone to be looking at it and being responsible for the security of it, at least for the United States, more so for the world. Anyway, so yeah, I think Space Force is a brilliant idea, but the program on Netflix, it's okay. Some people love it. For me, it's okay. I didn't find it that interesting. Steve Carell, that's who it is. That's the actor, Steve Carell. That just came back to me. Krista says, I received a new report today that Russia found a vaccine for COVID and will try it in Saudi Arabia. Why don't they try it in Russia? They've got COVID-19. Why don't they try it in Russia? The Rockefeller plan. He came out and did an about turn saying COVID isn't transmittable from asymptomatic people, yet we're still locked down. There you go. Absolutely. They also told us that we couldn't transmit it to our pets, only to come back 3 months later and say, keep your pets away from other pets and away from other humans because they can get it from you and you can get it from them. Funny that. Now, I don't know if that's true or not, but that's what they told us. Yeah, they've gotten so many things wrong. Yanni says, respect to President Trump, Chinese companies had a better deal with the U.S. Post Office than American companies in their own country. Well, not better than Amazon. Ooh, Yanni. Amazon had the deal of the millennium. They basically got a deal with the Postmaster General that allowed them to ship. It forced the U.S. Postal Service never worked on Sunday, ever, and only worked for part of the day on Saturday. So they delivered mail, but the post office was closed down around noon in most of the country on Saturdays. Never worked on Sundays. And then Amazon worked a deal with the Postmaster General during the Obama administration, and suddenly they're working on Sundays delivering packages exclusively for Amazon, as if they were Amazon's little BITCH. And they did so operating in many areas at a loss because it was prohibitively expensive to deliver 8 or 10 packages and have someone come in to deliver it over a 30 square mile area in, say, South Dakota, as opposed to delivering 300 packages over 1 square mile in Manhattan on a Sunday. And so, yeah, that was disastrous. And that really is a real problem. Now, you'll notice that Amazon saw the handwriting on the wall when Trump came in office. And now Amazon in the U.S. has thousands of combis, little minivans, which deliver their packages for them, especially if you have a warehouse in a certain vicinity. So we have a warehouse for Amazon in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, which is about 25 kilometers from here where the warehouse is. And that warehouse delivers to this entire region. And so in my neighborhood, I see all the time people driving little Amazon trucks delivering their packages from Amazon. The pandemic has been quite profitable for folks like Amazon, DHL, UPS, China. No, not really. I'm just being facetious. A lot of Chinese companies are in desperate straits now. Car manufacturers have lots full of cars that are going nowhere. If you go try to buy a Blu-ray player or DVD player in the U.S., good luck on that because we don't make them here anymore. They're all made either in Korea or in China. And the ones made in China haven't been produced and haven't been shipped here, so you can't get one. It's been that way for about 8 weeks now as people had nothing to do in lockdown, went out and bought DVD players and Blu-ray players and sucked up all of them on the marketplace. So the only place you can find them is online, as they'll come from China as they get released, and the prices are high because it's a seller's market, not a buyer's market. So that's one of the consequences of this is push up the prices of things to, you used to be able to get a good Blu-ray player from, say, Samsung for $69 US. Not anymore. Can't even find it for that price. The cheapest ones I've found are $159 for a similar product, which is crazy. Gareth says, haven't been able to get Blu-ray players in years. Now, I don't know if they're not manufacturing because of the disruption in the supply chain, which I suspect, or because they don't want to make them anymore. But that's just stupid because people have billions of DVDs and Blu-rays and they want to play them. So made in China, assembled in Korea, made in Taiwan. Ramaphosa will get Mars before anyone. Yeah, we'll see. Loved Hot Full video, Donna. Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. Do people still use DVD or Blu-ray? Yes, Christo. I have about 3,000 television shows and movies in Blu-ray and DVD. Why do I have so many? I always buy them not at retail. I get a good deal on them. But I have so many because I lived in Africa and I had no television, no entertainment. And when I work, I like to have something in the background. So frequently what I would do is I'd have something playing in the background, or Big Bang Theory over here, or The Closer, or something like that. Watch these programs, Firefly, which is one of my favorite shows. Watch them over and over again. Yeah, so lots of people have those things. By the way, all these people, listen, I've always been Inspector Gadget, huge into technology and early adopter of everything. The first MP3 player I had before it was even on the market because the order was held up by an injunction from a court preventing them from selling it. So I had to wait 4 months to get it. Anyway, I've always been an early adopter of technology. But I'm going to tell you what, all you people that say all you need is internet, all you need is Netflix, all you need is Hulu, that's crap. That's crap. None of those have everything I want to watch. And most of them only have a small portion of the things I want to watch. And they always promote their own crap. If I turn on Amazon Prime one more time and get presented with Black Lives Matter videos and programs, I'm just going to vomit. I don't care about it. You should take the hint. I don't watch it. I don't like propaganda. If I want propaganda, I'll go watch old Soviet and East German films. You know, that's what I'll do. Or I'll watch the NFL. That's propaganda. I don't care for that stuff. So, and the same thing with Netflix. You know, Netflix putting all this stuff up. It's ridiculous. Anyway, digitize, Chris. Then you can watch them anywhere, anytime, and not worry about disk degrading. Well, that's fair, but then you also have to back it up multiple places because drives degrade. And if you just leave it one place, just like the disk, you could lose it. And you don't even need it to degrade over time. You just need somebody to walk by it with something magnetic, by mistake. So yeah, there's lots of ways to do it. All lives matter. BLM is stupid. I agree, Rainier. Get you on the line, Lynn. Love that unicorn and the cherry blossoms. Well done, Lynn. Canceled all my streaming services because of Black Lives Matter nonsense. Well, good for you, Variable Vision. I haven't done it yet, but I plan to do it. SK Uzman watching too. Good to see you. Welcome there. Willem Wickelsby says, good show, Colonel. Many thanks. All right, folks, I'm at 2 hours. Thank you all for tuning in. I don't mean to dump on everybody and go away, but I'm going to drop off. I will do a Stray Voltage tomorrow and maybe do 2 streams tomorrow. We'll see. But 1 Stray Voltage for sure. And I thank everybody for tuning in today. So I'm going to see a big dip probably in hours watched today, which is fine. It's not about hours watched. It's about delivering quality content. And I don't want to be online just to take your time away. So it is Saturday evening, folks. Have a good, Owen says, oh, thanks. Send troops in. Yeah, I wish. I don't have any troops at my disposal anymore. But I appreciate you guys watching the content. Thank you so much for that, for the super chats and for the new members who joined yesterday. Thank you so much for that. We'll catch you guys later on. God bless. Be safe. And what does Big Daddy Liberty say? Never trust a commie? Never trust a commie, ladies and gentlemen. I agree with that. Anyway, I'm going to close out here, and I'm going to go ahead and use my closeout video. So thanks a lot. Take care.